Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking a deep dive into a seriously fascinating underwater world. We've been looking at the insights from Aquascape, and I gotta tell you, what we found completely changed how we look at fish tanks. If you've ever found yourself just mesmerized by those incredibly lush, miniature underwater forests you see online and wondered, how on earth does that actually work? Well, you're in exactly the right place. We're gonna break down the science, the design styles, and the sheer magic of keeping a literal tiny piece of nature alive right in your living room. Let's get into it.
So let's start with a really fundamental question. Does simply putting plants in a fish tank make it an aquascape? It's a super common assumption for beginners. You buy a glass box, throw in some standard neon pet store gravel, grab a few green aquatic plants, drop them in with your fish, and boom, you've got an aquascape, right? Well, the short answer? No, not at all. What we're actually looking at is a miniature ecosystem. We really need a complete paradigm shift here to understand this hobby. We aren't just decorating a glass box with green ornaments to make it look pretty for the fish. Actually, scratch that. It's more like we are playing Mother Nature. We're creating a living, breathing landscape where every single biological element is totally intertwined. Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1, Miniature Ecosystem, the Science of Balance. So behind all the stunning artistry of an underwater forest, there is some serious, invisible science happening 24/7 to keep the whole thing alive and thriving. And it all comes down to 4 pillars of balance. We're talking light, nutrients, CO2, and microbes. Everything in an aquascape is deeply, deeply interconnected. And these 4 elements, they have to work in perfect harmony. Think about it. If you blast the tank with intense lighting, but you aren't providing enough CO2, the plants physically cannot absorb the nutrients in the water. And what happens then? Well, the algae takes over. Seriously, mess up just one of these pillars and your beautiful, pristine tank will turn into a soggy green algae nightmare in no time. Finding that exact balance is the true core of aquascaping. But when those 4 pillars are balanced, they fuel this brilliant, self-cleaning natural cycle. It's like a biological engine. Step 1, your aquatic plants absorb the light and the CO2 you provide to perform photosynthesis. Step 2, the fish in the tank eat and, well, they produce organic waste. Then, step 3, the invisible heroes. These are the beneficial microbes living in your filter and your soil, and they break down and convert that toxic organic waste into essential nutrients. Finally, the plants absorb those nutrients to grow, filtering the water naturally for the fish. When this cycle is perfectly stable, the water becomes absolutely crystal clear. It's just incredible. All right, moving on to section 2, fish tank or aquascape. Understanding the core differences. To truly grasp the nuances of this hobby, we've got to draw a really clear line between traditional fish keeping and true aquascaping. From the outside, they might look kind of similar, but their goals are completely different. What's really interesting about this slide is how it breaks that down. In a traditional fish tank, the focus is entirely on the fish, right? Their colors, their size. You usually have an inert gravel substrate because, hey, it's easy to vacuum. You've low CO2 needs and a decorative light that's really just there so you can see the fish. But in an aquascape, the focus shifts entirely to the plants and the overall layout. You almost always have to use a nutrient-rich, active soil. CO2 injection is absolutely essential, and you need specialized lighting built specifically with the right spectrum to trigger plant photosynthesis. In an aquascape, the plants are the main characters. The fish, they're really just beautiful background extras adding a bit of dynamic movement. It really all boils down to this quote right here. CO2 is the soul of the aquascape. Without it, plants grow slowly, lose color, and invite algae. While traditional fish tanks just need a bubbling airstone for some oxygen, these lush underwater forests are heavily dependent on injected carbon dioxide. If you want those vibrant reds or those dense, lush green carpets of plants covering the floor, you literally cannot skip the CO2. It is the invisible fuel driving the entire engine of your underwater ecosystem.
Okay, section 3, the art of landscaping, designing with nature.
Once you understand the scientific balance, you actually get to play with the art. This is where we introduce the concept of hardscape. This means using carefully chosen rocks and driftwood to create the permanent structural skeleton of your design before a single drop of water or a single plant is even added. Take the Iwagumi style, for example. It's this minimalist Japanese aquascaping style that focuses heavily on specific, dramatic rock formations and minimal plant variety. It usually replicates a serene, rolling, grassy hill with ancient stones jutting out. But hey,
Don't let the visual minimalism fool you. This deceptively simple rock-based style is actually incredibly difficult to master. Why? Because there are so few elements to hide behind, so any tiny flaw in spatial balance or proportion stands out immediately. It requires perfect visual harmony. Now, in stark contrast to the strict minimalism of Iwagumi, we have the incredibly popular Dutch style. This dense, lush style simulates wild nature, and it relies heavily on intricately placed driftwood, rocks, moss, and just incredibly vibrant stem plants. These plants are meticulously trimmed to create overlapping terraces and incredible depth. It's that wild, overgrown, colorful forest aesthetic. The whole vibe is about vibrant color contrast and sheer, breathtaking plant density. And then we have the Biotope style. Now, this style is for the true nature purist out there. A biotope is a precise, scientifically accurate replication of a specific, real-world natural environment. We're talking about sourcing the exact native fish, the exact native plants, the specific type of river rocks, and even mimicking the dark, tannin-stained tint of the water from decaying leaves. It's absolutely marvelous to realize you are literally recreating an exact slice of an Amazonian tributary or a Southeast Asian jungle stream right there in your living room. How cool is that? Let's transition to Section 4, Truths for Beginners, Costs, Myths, and Getting Started. Let's bring this back down to earth and break down the realities of the budget. You really do not need massive funding to start aquascaping. A mini setup offers a very accessible, basic cost. It's perfect for nano tanks and simple, low-light plants that don't strictly require CO2. Then, a mid-range budget brings in moderate costs, but crucially, it allows for a basic CO2 injection system and dedicated plant lighting, which opens up way more design options. And of course, the high-end tier involves premium costs for large, complex layouts with automated high-tech gear. But the key takeaway here? A stunning, biologically balanced mini tank can absolutely be built on a modest starter budget, for sure. Now, let's debunk a massive myth right off the bat. Aquascapes take way too much time to maintain. You hear this all the time, and it honestly scares people away. But the truth is, this heavy workload is only really applicable during the very first few weeks of the initial setup phase. Once your micro-ecosystem stabilizes, once that brilliant biological cycle of microbes and plants actually matures, the tank practically runs itself. We are talking about very basic weekly maintenance here, like a quick 20% water change, trimming some overgrown plant leaves, and just wiping the glass. It's incredibly manageable. Here's another classic, and oh man, the amount of heartbreak this one has caused. Meth. Just stick the plant in the gravel and it will live. As we learned earlier, true aquatic plants need a nutrient-rich base. If you just shove a delicate stem plant into barren, sterile pet store gravel with zero nutrients and no CO2 in the water, you are essentially starving it to death. Beginners are always so shocked when their expensive new plants melt into a yellow, mushy mess a week later. Remember, those 4 pillars of balance, folks. You have to feed the plants. So, to ensure you find success and joy instead of frustration, I highly recommend following these beginner best practices. First off, start with easy-to-grow, hardy green plants. Second, avoid difficult red plants at first. They require intense light and precise CO2 dialing that almost always triggers an algae bloom for beginners. Third, keep your layout simple. Don't try a highly technical Iwagumi right out of the gate. And finally, maintain a very low fish population to keep organic waste highly manageable while your beneficial microbes establish their colonies. Follow this, and you've got a clear, stress-free roadmap to your first successful build. Before we wrap up this explainer, let's talk about something incredibly special that isn't just about science or art, and that's the healing power of the microuniverse. There is a profound psychological relief that comes from this hobby. Think about it. After a long, stressful day filled with screens, emails, and just noise, sitting down in a dim room to watch a tiny, silent ecosystem that you personally nurtured, it's magical. Watching the plants gently sway in the current, seeing the fish gracefully darting through the leaves, observing how the whole system grows and thrives over time, it's deeply calming. It's a proven form of stress relief. It really is like having a daily living meditation right in your home. Which brings us to our final provocative thought. Do you choose to just watch a fish, or do you want to care for an entire forest? That single question perfectly summarizes the ultimate paradigm shift of aquascaping. It transforms you from a passive observer of a pet into an active, engaged caretaker of a thriving, balanced slice of nature. I really hope this explainer has inspired you to look completely differently at the world beneath the water's surface. And hey, Perhaps it has even inspired you to begin crafting a micro-universe of your very own. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive, and keep exploring